Hello, and welcome to Adventures in AI, where the Insight Flow team members share things that have caught our attention over the past week and talk about our experiences in the world of AI. I'm Giles.
I'm Rich.
And I'm Graham. Giles, you're going to do Dr. Dolittle on us today, I think.
Yeah. So I'm afraid I'm going a little bit off piste on this one. So there's a US-based not-for-profit called EarthSpecies that's looking to use machine learning to decode communication in other species. Or to put it slightly more simply, they want to train a machine to listen to and talk to animals and birds. So if they're actually successful, then as you were mentioning, Graham, the story of Dr. Dolittle, who's a doctor who could speak to animals in their own language, may finally come true. And I think this would be revolutionary for veterinary science and our wider understanding of the world. And I love the idea. I mean, one of the species that they've talked about is analysing whale song, and so being able to speak to whales, birds, and other animals and mammals, I think would be amazing. So although I don't know, and they weren't sure whether they would actually know what they were talking about in the languages that they're speaking, because obviously the machines can understand the patterns, but they won't necessarily know exactly what those patterns mean. And this could be quite dangerous. So we all know what happens when humans who don't speak the same language start talking to each other. So who knows? We may even start the first interspecies war.
It's such a brilliant idea. I love the fact that we are learning to shout, at least intelligibly, loudly, but have absolutely no idea what we're going to say. Though presumably, if we do start the war, we can sort of reverse it and use the AI to reverse it and actually then start the peace process.
As well, it could put a real different spin on your meditation music if you're listening to whale song, if you actually find out what they're saying.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, imagine they're actually saying, God, those bloody humans. Well, I was just going to say, bringing it back a little bit to why is that relevant to this particular podcast about AI, more focused on business. I think there are some interesting points on it that shed light on the nature of machine learning based models, which we see more widely in the kind of applications of AI that we have. So first of all, they're language agnostic. So I think one of the biggest strengths of large language models is they can converse in many different human languages, as well as code, data structures, and other syntaxes. And unlike many humans, they can switch between them seamlessly, which I think is a real superpower.
Yeah, I think on that point with coding, I'm somebody that has never coded at all, but I've been able to kind of semi-masquerade as a coder through using ChatGPT, and that's both at work and kind of personal projects as well.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the other thing was, if something has a pattern, then machine learning properly trained will find that pattern and will allow you to replicate using that pattern. Because essentially what the model is just a prediction model. So it's going, well, what's the most likely next word? Or autocomplete, I think you like to call it, Rich. So I thought this particular kind of use case of AI was just a brilliant illustration of how we can start thinking about generative AI models as tools that enable us to speak multiple languages and different dialects without actually needing to learn them.
Yeah, and I think actually this experiment really neatly explains the concept of why large language models work for language, but actually they're pretty naff for maths. And if you think about it, maths is like the universal language, so to speak. So if we met aliens tomorrow, we wouldn't be able to speak to them, but they'd know what pi is. So if it's a universal language, why are large language models not so good at it? And the answer really lies in, if you think about, if you ask someone a text or verbal based question, there are actually thousands of possible answers that they could give, or I guess thousands of possible answers that the whale could give in terms of the arrangement of words and still be correct. But when you're talking about maths problems, so there's usually what kind of one answer, and maybe there's, if you're lucky, two ways to get there. So what everybody said before, and by that I mean all of the things that the large language model has been trained on, they probably don't help get you to the answer, because you need that exact answer that's for your question.
Oh, Rich, you've brought maths into this. That's very boring. I'm going back to the idea of talking to animals. I think we absolutely need it to happen, because I want Douglas Adams to be right and to prove that actually mice are the most intelligent creatures on Earth.
I still think it's dolphins, but yeah, we'll see. Maybe we'll find out. Anyway, so Graham, I know you wanted to talk about big, scary, serious things like the global economic and commercial impact of AI.
Yeah, moving on from mice running the world, it's back to the economists running the world. I mean, I think I want to look at the impact of AI. We're talking about AI. We're talking about AI on this podcast. Lots of people are talking about AI. And I think what's really interesting is that we're recognizing the ability of Gen AI to make pictures, to write creative text, to write music. And it's really caught the imagination. I think everybody who's at all interested has had a play with DALL-E or with various of the tools, and sort of or asked Chat GPT to write a sad poem in French about the arrival of February. You know, it does all these things. But I think what I don't see talked about, perhaps quite to the same degree, commonly, is the commercial and economic impact. And it's worth talking about. It really is worth talking about, because we're all living in a world that I think is going to change. I don't think there's any real doubt about that. And you know, the impact for business, and therefore for people looking at business and managing business and leading business, is going to be found. And there's the detail of the commercial impact, the facts.
Yeah, I mean, I think just thinking about the number of different use cases that we're looking at for AI within business specifically, the impact could be absolutely huge. And I think it's really down to the specifics of individual roles and tasks that can be done by AI that frees up humans to do other things, hopefully more value added things and more interesting things, that, you know, the impact on the economy overall, I think, will be massive.
Yeah. I mean, inevitably, McKinsey, Goldman Sachs, Forbes are all writing papers. And in fact, I've been reading papers this week from those three in particular. And those papers have been spread out over the last 6 months or so. And we'll provide links to them all in the details. Now, clearly, because I'm mentioning them, they all believe the commercial impact is going to be massive. But I think some of the stuff that they're drawing on is really interesting. So the Goldman Sachs paper pointed out that 60% of today's workers are employed in occupations that didn't exist in 1940s. 60%.
That's 8 years ago, Graham. I think none of us were alive then. Although I guess maybe some of Charles's whales may have been.
Yes, or Iceland sharks. But yes, it is 80 years ago, and you're quite right. But I think that one of the things we've seen is that the change has been very rapid over the last 20 to 30 years, and there's a great fun list of the occupations that used to exist that no longer exist, like lift attendant and various others. But I know, it's very much a theme that the digital revolution brought in roles that we'd never heard of before that are now commonplace. So this idea of a very rapid changeover in what the workforce looks at is, I think, really profound, and it is something that we need to think about, need to talk about, and probably need to plan for. Goldman also reckons that AI is going to raise the global GDP by 7%. Now, we don't know where that rise is exactly going to be, and it is almost certain that it's going to be asymmetric and spread unevenly around the place. But I think it's incumbent on us to try and identify where that might be, where the opportunities are, and where our own businesses should be going. And the final bit I'm going to pull out for the moment from the Goldman paper is that they reckon that 2/3 of all occupations will be wholly or partly automated. Now, the partly bit is important. Some people's jobs won't be affected very much. They will do a little bit through using Gen AI or AI. But it is absolutely certain that most people will be affected in their own current roles. That their daily job will be partially, or of course, if it's wholly automated, they will be out of the job. And I think that reading what Goldman have to say, it's very compelling. But they're also looking at where growth comes, and there's sort of a couple of ways of approaching this. So, Goldman are looking at where that GDP increase comes from, and they reckon that there are sort of three major areas. Where the first one is through new production and application releases, through new ways of doing things, and I think that that's the one that feels least talked about, actually, in many ways. This idea that says that it's not just, AI won't just help us do what we do well today, but AI will change how we do things and improve workflows and processes. So I think there's a really interesting piece around there. They feel that there's going to be growth in business for charging premiums for AI integrated offerings. Now, I'm not sure that I believe this one so much. The idea that says that we can charge more because we are using AI, against the context of saying that everything's going to change and everybody's going to be using your AI. So I'm not sure that one feels as plausible, but it's a really interesting idea, and certainly possibly.
So Graham, I think it's something we covered last week in the podcast, actually, around the pricing for GitHub in particular. And if you look at where these things are being priced at the moment, I would say that one feels like it's not backed up by what we've seen so far about pricing for AI.
Yeah, that makes complete sense, and I mean, I think that's optimistic, and I'm not entirely sure it's logically consistent. But then, and the final area they're feeling is where there's growth available, is that prices will increase over time because AI delivers additional value. Now, again, it's a really interesting discussion, and so the first question: where does AI add value? Can we add value through AI, and can we add value for which we can charge more? Is a really fascinating and proper discussion. But again, I suspect that it's a relatively short-term effect. I suspect that AI added value will become the norm, and whether we can approach it with an inflationary eye or not, I don't know.
So I have two questions, I suppose, related to this. So the first one is there an argument that says actually it might have a deflationary impact and a contraction impact because people are employed less and the models are doing more of the work at a low cost, and therefore you don't get the increase that you would get otherwise. So that's one possible outcome of it. And the other one is, well, actually, looking on a more positive note, if AI enables us to achieve things 10 times faster, which I think it does, then actually we can get 10 times more things done. And therefore, actually, it's more about the number of cycles in the economy than it is about the individual value of items that are purchased, if that makes sense. So I think, honestly, I think it could go either way, but I think it's interesting just to look at how it might go and what the different routes are.
I think it makes complete sense, and you're reminding me of all the economic questions and conversations around the introduction of the industrial age and this move from artisan small batch production to very efficient machine production across a whole variety of different industries. But if you take weaving as quite a good example of that, I mean, I think what you probably saw there is it feels plausible again in that there's a short term deflationary impact as the new bulk of materials were coming out of the industrialized looms against what artisan weavers could have created beforehand. But the market catches up. The market finds new uses for the materials, new markets for the materials that people, for instance, who would never have considered buying really high-end, high-quality cottons beforehand because they were just so expensive, suddenly started to buy them and started to find that they could use these higher grade products and got used to using these higher grade products. And I suspect the sort of the deflationary dip, it was very quickly replaced by an inflationary or a growth increase as people then suddenly started to use these things. And that feels like a conversation that's sensible in terms of AI. You know, there's a whole lot of things that it does, a whole lot of things that it could do, there's a whole lot of things it's delivering. And it will take us a while to catch up with what those are and what that looks like. And then suddenly we'll go, this is stuff we need. This moves from being a luxury to an everyday good, or this moves from being something we'd never considered using before to something that we have, that we use every day. So I think you're quite right to identify that. I think there's some really interesting conversations around that. And yeah, I hasten to add, I am not an economist, so there's going to be people out there who howling abuse at the podcast for my ineptitude around that. But I suspect that there's a sensible conversation, and it's possibly something we might return to.
The thing we all know about economists, though, Graham, is if you put 5 of them in a room, you'll get 10 different opinions.
That's very true, and I have actually done some economics in my past history, not terribly successfully, it must be said. The interesting thing here, though, and actually following on this theme about this impact and what's going to happen for large scale transformation happen, I think businesses, and this is very much coming from the Goldman Sachs paper, businesses will need to make significant investment and upfront investment in physical, digital, and human capital. And if you look at each one of those in turn and reversing it, actually, you know, the investment in people is going to need to be quite profound and substantial. We're going to have to change and train and create new professions, or certainly skills. We're going to have to manage them differently, and we're going to have to create teams in different ways. All that, of course, requires investment of all sorts of things, but effort and money being the most important parts of that. The relationship between AI and digital is a really incestuous, strange one. They're very, very close cousins, and as we increase the use of AI, we are increasing the use of or changing the use of how we're using digital. And we've talked already on previous episodes of the podcast about the relationship between the digital revolution and the AI revolution. And I think that the investment in digital is likely to change. Whether it will increase or decrease, I'm not sure to say, but it will certainly change. And then finally, that idea of the straight physical. Are we going to be talking to AI entities at the point of sale in a shop? Are we going to be talking to AI entities in our taxis who are driving us, or interacting with AI entities on buses or trains or what have you? And I'm sure there's a huge change to the physical environment coming up. And on the back of this, Goldman research, they're estimating that AI investment will approach $100 billion in the US and $200 billion globally by 2025, less than 18 months away. And I
I
think
think,
that
so,
what we have to look at.
Graham, sorry, just to jump in on those numbers, I think you're very right to talk about AI as a revolution, and those are some really big numbers from Goldman Sachs. But I wanted to point out to maybe someone, if you're listening to this and you're a bit on the fence about AI, there's actually very low barriers to entry in terms of getting up and started and seeing what it can do, and that can be literally as little as signing up for an account, going on Bard, Bing, or ChatGPT, and it can actually make real impacts within as little as like 5 or 10 minutes. So I guess don't be scared by these numbers. I think that yes, all these is going to come true, but there's something you can do in the next 5 minutes to explore it yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And carrying on this thing and talking about this, going back to the human capital, Goldman Sachs in that survey, so they were surveying Fortune 500 CEOs. 72% of the people they surveyed reckoned that within 5 years, AI would mean that they'd need fewer staff. Now, I think this is a really interesting, looping back to this idea that of the professions that existed and don't anymore, and the professions that didn't exist and do these days. I wonder whether they're overestimating the ability to cut workforce in that survey and underestimating the ability to have to generate new tasks and new types of people and new types of team to deal with AI. So I wonder if there's a piece there that says that all they can see as CEOs of Fortune 500 companies is the replacement of tasks that humans do, and are not seeing the requirement to manage, to change, to do things in a different way. And I think there's something quite interesting around that whole conversation.
Yeah, I mean that for me is again something we've covered in previous episodes around how should you think about AI, and should you think about it as a way of saving cost, or should you think about it as a way of embracing opportunity? I think, I mean, take a specific example of customer success. If all of your competitors are using AI to deliver a really personalized service to your customers, and you're just using it to try and cut costs, then your business won't survive very long. So I think it's a relatively short-sighted view to say that actually the opportunity for AI is to cut costs rather than serve customers better and deliver new products and and really innovate, because I think that's where its biggest strengths are, not cost cutting.
Yeah, I think that's really useful, and in fact, it leads on to the final thing that I want to talk about. So Forbes, in this case, talking about this, and their paper has some really interesting information and insight. But I think the one I want to pull out of it is where, according to Forbes, AI is happening at the moment across the business, and they pulled out a big long list, but I want to pull out 5 different areas. So they're talking about the top one is absolutely customer service, and I think we know that's chatbots, that's the whole customer non-service piece, and I think that is definitely an area that, back to what you've just said, Giles, I think that is definitely an area where people wrongly think of it as cost saving and call it better service. Our experience is that that's not true. AI used really well probably can deliver fantastic customer service. I'm not sure it's there yet. There's customer service, cybersecurity and fraud management, accounting, inventory management and supply chain ops, and finally, of course, to write and translate and create content. Now, if you look at those 5 areas, you're covering a huge chunk of every business: customer service, cybersecurity, the IT, accounting, inventory management, supply chain, and then the any part of content writers, so it's marketing and sales and so forth. And what Forbes are basically saying there is already nearly all of organizations are being impacted in some way. And I've chosen ones where, these are the higher use ones. If you look down the list, there are a variety of other bits and pieces where you can start to say, okay, I can see that that's going to grow. Where, for instance, HR and recruitment and those other bits and pieces. So I think the thing that I want to pull out of all these papers and pull out of what I think people are saying is probably 3 points. One, it's happening, and it's happening already quite a large scale, and it's going to be huge. There's a vast amount of money. I think that the idea that every business and every occupation within the business in some way is going to be touched is profound. And I think that, as I often say, that people need to be thinking about this and planning for it. And we need to slightly get away from the shiny fun, it's a bit like magic stuff of DALL-E and the various other bits, however cool they are, and they are magnificently cool. I think we have to be driving conversations to say there is a much more serious thread to this that we need to be looking at, and we need to be looking at it in terms of our own businesses, and we also probably need to be looking at it in terms of our own careers and our own set of skills and aptitudes.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the case. I suppose the parallel I'd draw, you mentioned the loom, and that was the start of industrializing industrial processes, and really what we're talking about here is industrializing knowledge processes. So the list of things there require knowledge, which has traditionally been a human domain, and now isn't anymore. So that's fascinating stuff. Thanks for that, Graham. So, Rich, I know you want to talk about cheating. What do you want to say about cheating?
Yes, exactly. Well, I'm here to tell you all that you should be cheating on your homework, and I guess so. The reason behind that is using AI often feels like you're cheating, and there's I guess typically a natural aversion to that. But I actually think the more important question is what actually is cheating in the world of AI. And so I want to kind of help set the tone a little bit of why I wanted to talk about this, and why you should be cheating on your homework. And so last week I explored the art of getting AI generated content to sound like it was written by a human. And it actually occurred to me afterwards that a slightly Machiavellian consequence of that process that I just taught is that I've just given people a method to slip past the eyes of AI detection tools, such as the kind of those that are used by quite a lot of schools or universities. And I did actually test it, and it does work for those that that do actually want to know. But that got me thinking, like, is employing AI really, I guess, akin to cheating? Now, I think the notion of feeding your English lit essay title into an AI and then nonchalantly submitting the answer as your own work is without a doubt a shortcut that circumvents, I guess, the fundamental aspects of learning. But to me, that's not really using AI. That's just being lazy. That's just like copying your mate's homework. When I talk about using AI, if I were to use the English lit essay as an example, imagine instead you're now dedicating an hour to a discussion with a literary expert. And that expert's got access to every paragraph, sentence, and word of the text that you're studying, along with literally billions of real examples of language usage and meaning, all of that at their fingertips, accessible in microseconds. You could then spend that hour debating that literature with the expert, questioning tons of assumptions, refining your understanding. And then to top it off at the end, the expert distills all of that wonderful, I guess, collective wisdom that you've come up with together into an essay that captures all the perspectives and nuance of the conversation you've just had.
I think, Rich, there's actually a question here. I mean, I've been fascinated by AI in education for a while, and come from a family of educationists, so this is a sort of ongoing conversation. But the idea that the essay is the end point is kind of wrong. The essay is there to just demonstrate different thinking. So I think what you've just talked about is actually an incredibly good educational process, and an incredibly good process for anything. And I'm wary of those people who criticize AI because it makes writing essays easier, because it feels as though they're not understanding what education is, and why we write essays. And I think that actually, you can kind of put that parallel into, why do you write essays? And that whole conversation also goes into a conversation that says, why do you use AI? And what comes from that.
Yeah, I think you're right. And actually, with education, I think what we're really after, it's that ability to think critically. And you can do that with your own personal AI tutor and come to a conclusion. And I think when you put it like that, I actually think the process of education's it's kind of not only preserved, but it's actually enriched. And the only thing that you're bypassing is time. And I think if that's cheating, to me, it's only cheating in the sense that it's, I don't know, it's a cheat code to success. So I don't know about you two, but I definitely prefer going to work with max health, invisibility, and God mode activated.
Well, I think for me, this is about fundamentally what is an education system there to do. And, our education system was set up as a result of the Industrial Revolution, or the majority of it, certainly the public education system, as a way of training people to be workers and professionals in that society. And actually, as soon as you start upending what skills are needed and how people will do those roles, then you have to rethink the education system as well. And so, is it going to be more important for me in 3, 4, 5 years' time to be able to drive an AI, or is it going to be more important for me to be able to read a book and write an essay from it? And I would go for the former rather than the latter personally. Which is not to say that reading a book won't still be useful and a nice pastime, but I think it won't be the thing that drives the economy forward. It won't be the thing that enables people to function well in the workplace and to compete effectively in the workplace.
Yeah, I saw the thing that completely supports that I thought was great. And I think it was a tweet I saw, and I'll try and look it out and reference it. But the tweet that said that the brilliant teacher who'd got fed up with the students cheating, possibly, or using AI, and it had set homework as, here is an AI prompt, take the output that the AI produces from this prompt and criticize it. And that feels to me to be much more, A, very forward thinking and very sensible, but B, much more about why we're doing this stuff, why we're in education, of learning to think and think in different ways. It also is hilariously subversive of those students who are trying to cheat using AI.
Yeah, I love that part.
Yeah, I think it's funny. You'll never be able to fully stop students cheating, so why not embrace it and put a little twist on the question? And actually, if, as we're saying, people are going to be using AI in their day-to-day jobs, then I think it's a perfect time to start to introduce that and introduce actually the AI process of creating things, because there are ways to do it correctly and ways to do it wrongly as well.
Yeah, I think it was probably 10 or 15 years ago where schools started to embrace computers and actually go, oh, okay, maybe you shouldn't use an exercise book to write your essay in. You should do it on a computer, because that's what you're going to be using when you're in the workplace. So I see this as being a similar kind of transition, but it is more fundamental, because actually the nuts and bolts of what you're taught in school is changing. And I think also the other sort of observation I would have is, if you think of the modern workplace, because of the speed of technical or technological innovation, most people in work don't just start with the knowledge that they had from university or from whatever qualifications they've got and then stop learning at that point. Most people now have to continue learning through their entire career, and whether that's skills or whether it's things that knowledge or whatever. And I think that in the world of AI, it's actually a really helpful tool to help for that continuous learning. Certainly, in terms of programming, I'm constantly using the advice of the AI to help me figure out how to do something or how to use a particular library of software.
You mean you're not inventing all the brilliant stuff that goes into Insight Flow, Giles?
Oh, yes, I am. Sorry. Yeah, absolutely. Inventing all of it, building it all from scratch. No, that would. Why would I want to do that? That would be stupid. It's much better to stand on the shoulder of giants.
Rich, isn't this still part of that thing? I mean, I am old enough to remember the very point at which calculators were first allowed in science exams at school. And I remember, there was this thing that said you can have a normal calculator, but you're not allowed a scientific calculator that gives you access to the log tables and all of that sort of stuff. And this sense that, were we cheating using a calculator? And as Giles sort of touched on earlier, this idea that we move from writing to computers. In fact, I know that Pearson and AQA, which is two of the big UK exam boards, have this year for the first time actually introduced exams that will be done purely digitally or online or whatever, which kind of, to me, it blows my mind slightly that this hasn't happened before. But it's not cheating. I think the point around for those cases, clearly it's not cheating. If the exam boards say it's not cheating, it's definitely not cheating. But it feels this is inevitable and natural.
So I worked with a company 10 years ago at least that were providing exams using remote proctoring, which is the kind of method that you can allow that, but it was for professional qualifications in the IT sector. So it's been around for quite a while. It's just as always with the future, not evenly distributed.
I think you're totally right, both Graham and Giles. And the thing that it reminded me of was, I think it was the very first intro to my university course. They told us, don't use Wikipedia. You can't trust what's on the internet. And I think now it's kind of quite widely held belief that in terms of as a source of information, Wikipedia is probably one of the best there is, because it's got all the sources there in the first place. And in terms of what you can find on the internet nowadays, there's probably nothing that's completely exempt from any bias.
Rich, is it cheating to use Wikipedia?
So I don't think it's cheating to use Wikipedia, but the caveat to that is you've got all the sources underneath it, so it's your fault if you got something wrong and didn't double check it.
So is it cheating if you cite one of the sources and not Wikipedia?
Actually, what you should be doing is citing the sources and not the fact that you actually just got it from Wikipedia. But in terms of method, yeah, Wikipedia all the way.
I'm not so sure Jimmy Whale would agree with that, but anyway. So on that, I think we've had a good chat about a number of things. So can we talk? So talking of Jimmy Whale, can AI help us talk to whales? So we've covered that. We've covered the economic impact and commercial impact of AI, which is significant, and there's a lot of money in there. So keep that in mind, and then why we should be cheating. So I think we've really covered quite a lot this week. So thank you, guys, for your thoughts and your time. I've been Giles.
I've been Graham.
I've been Rich.